Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime on trending criminal cases. And this is one that has had people scratching their heads since September of this past year, September 2024. That is the broad daylight inside a judge's chamber shooting by a sheriff, Mickey Stines, in Letcher County, Kentucky, of the judge who works inside that chamber, Judge Kevin Mullins. He was 54, left the community stunned, horrified, and the rest of this country going, what is happening in Letcher County, Kentucky? He was who people thought was a respected judge. Again, the alleged shooter, the very sheriff working in that community. Without further ado, best guess, we've got Elizabeth Jones. She is host of Hillbilly Crime and an investigative reporter, I would say, because she is breaking this case down and growing her channel. Next up, we've got an active district attorney in 5 rural counties in Tennessee, the General Mark Davidson here. And last but certainly not least, a very formidable criminal defense attorney. We've got John Tompkins. You see that, the defender. That's what he does for a living. He defends people who get themselves in trouble. And John, you'll appreciate this. I don't know anything about this. I just saw a tweet. A guy named Macklemore, who's a rapper. He rapped a song last year with the lyrics "F the police" and other things. And guess what? His house got robbed last night. And who did he call? He called the police right away. So the police tweeted that out to let people know. So Macklemore, just think a little bit more about your lyrics before the next time you want to write a song, if you're going to call the police. What you should have done is gone and found them all on your own. But I digress. So for those who are new to this crime happened September 19th of this past year. So just in the fall. It happened again, very unusual. You don't hear about this every day. Inside Judge Kevin Mullins' own chambers at the Letcher County Courthouse. He was 54. The shooter is Sheriff Sean Mickey Stines. And typically we say alleged, and I guess you still need to say that, but he was on camera, and we see it all play out. He is now turned 44 years old. If he turned 54, he would have aged quite a bit. I'm getting a little bit of an audio hit, so I'm going to just mute, I think it's coming off of John's computer here. But so Elizabeth, to you, what, all these months have passed now, I guess 7 or 8 months. And what is the feeling within Letcher County? There is news that we're going to get to, but what is the general sense right now? And Elizabeth froze up on us. Look at that. Freezing up on a critical question. Mark, let me come to you. Elizabeth, you there? Elizabeth? She's freezing up again. This could be a long night for Surviving the Survivor. General Mark, let me ask you, since I just... the term allegedly is used by, authorities, prosecutors, people in the news. In this case, what about the use of that word? I mean, we see this murder literally playing out on camera, and you see exactly who shot who and when. Is that a word that you would continue to use as a prosecutor here?
Yes, if I'm talking to the media or making any public statement about the case in response to any questioning or inquiry, the sheriff is legally entitled to the presumption of innocence that attaches to all defendants, and that will remain the case until a jury either convicts him or he pleads guilty. But until that point in time, presumed innocent until proven guilty still applies. So I would always use the term allegedly until we have a conviction. Yes.
Good to know. And I won't get sued if I use it. Elizabeth, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me now. She is still in deep thought, frozen. we got to get some better Wi-Fi out there in Letcher County. She's working to come back on. But John Tompkins, to you, this is a case that's got to be incredibly difficult for a defense attorney for exactly the reasons we were just talking about. We've got the full 10-minute video, at least the biggest clip of the video that exists without the actual shooting, as far as I know. But John, to you, all you have to do is look at the video, which we will eventually do, to see that it is Mickey Stines, unless it's someone who's a doppelganger, shooting and killing Judge Kevin Mullins. So, I mean, you've dealt with all kinds of defendants and clients. What are you doing when it comes to the video here? Oh, and hang on, there you go. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, so this is not obviously going to be a case where the question is who done it? Did they get the right guy? However, there are a series of affirmative defenses available in these kinds of cases. And an affirmative defense is where you say the acts that I performed would normally be considered a crime. However, there are extenuating circumstances that excuse or justify that crime. And affirmative defenses include mental health, mental disease defect, self-defense, defense of another, so it's defense of a third person, duress, and then there can be mitigators that lessen it from a first-degree murder or an actual murder down to a manslaughter type count, sudden heat of passion, those types of defenses. So it's not going to be a case where you're challenging fingerprints, for instance. Did they get the right guy? Did they identify the fingerprint correctly? Or DNA, because it's not a whodunit, they got the wrong guy. It's a what is behind the video that you're seeing. A picture might be worth 1,000 words, but an investigation is worth 1,000 pictures.
Oh, there, very well said. I like that. I want to use that. Elizabeth, can you hear us? Awesome. So I was asking you, what is, I guess, the sentiment? What is the feeling like in Letcher County after 7 or 8 months that have passed since this shooting took place? No, she's freezing. COE, see if we can get a better connection here. I'm gonna bounce her out and have the COE work on this. So, General, to you, the newsiest part of this, and there's a bunch of things to discuss, but there was a motion to dismiss the indictment that was filed 6 days ago, and it's by Mickey Stines, his own attorneys, Jeremy and Kerry Bartley. And here are the claims. It was an unrecorded grand jury meeting that violated Kentucky law. Let's start right there. I mean, in your grand jury proceedings in rural Tennessee, is everything recorded? Oh, got you muted there, Mark. So gotta hang on a second, Mark. All right, go ahead.
The answer to that question is no. In Tennessee, we do not record or transcribe grand jury proceedings. They're confidential, usually only for about a week until everybody's rounded up and picked up that needs to be picked up. But that's also to protect people who might come before the grand jury to provide information. Now, Kentucky has a rule 5.16 that does require the Commonwealth to record or transcribe grand jury proceedings. And it does provide that a failure to do that could result in a dismissal of the indictment unless the Commonwealth can show good cause for a failure to record. So I'll be curious to see what response the Commonwealth files to this motion. I'd be surprised in a case of this interest and magnitude if there was a failure to record or transcribe the grand jury proceedings. That would shock me, frankly. But even if there was some kind of failure, a mechanical failure can be excused according to that rule 5.16, or the Commonwealth can show some other good cause. So we'll have to see what the response is that's filed in court by the Commonwealth.
Yeah, whenever we do this show, this topic, we get the good people of Kentucky. So welcome in, Kentuckians. And I was just going to go look at the COE. She's playing. The COE is telling me that we're all good. And I'm going to ask a question, and now Elizabeth disappears, but she'll be back. The COE will help walk her through it. But John, to you. Okay, so one of the claims by the defense you just heard is an unrecorded grand jury meeting that violated Kentucky law. Also, it doesn't end there. Grand jurors requested documents, and it's unclear what they were, but they were never turned over, apparently, to the grand jurors who were asking to see documents pertaining to this case. And then they talk about a detective, a law enforcement officer named Clayton Stamper, and they say his testimony was incomplete or evasive, especially as it pertains to Mickey Stines' mental health, which we're going to get to. And I see Elizabeth setting back up. We'll come to Elizabeth in just a minute. But John, to you, these are three key points. There's actually a fourth one, and that is a rebuttal by the prosecutors, which I'll get to in just 1 second. But what about this motion to dismiss this indictment? They essentially want the prosecutor, the government here, to say there's no case. We screwed up the grand jury. Mr. Mickey Stines is a free man and able to go. They want to do this, I think, with prejudice, meaning I believe that he can't be tried again.
Well, he can't be charged again. He hasn't faced
charged.
Sorry to be technical, but we are lawyers. No, these are really serious allegations, and they are the kind of allegations that could lead to dismissal with prejudice. There's obviously going to be a response. We need to hear what the state has to say, and the rule in Kentucky is a little bit different than the rule in Indiana. And technically, if you read the rule, it says that they only have to transcribe testimony. That's a really poorly written statute. We see that a lot. Legislatures don't do what the general and I do, so they kind of write a statute without real detailed knowledge. I mean, technically, you read that and it says you only have to transcribe the testimony. So we didn't have to transcribe the questions. You'd say it doesn't require us to do that. It says only the testimony. It doesn't say the whole proceedings. It just says the testimony. I hope they don't get into a war of semantics about that. The general idea is this is supposed to be a process that a grand jury, which is not run by the prosecutor, but is supported by the prosecutor. There has to be someone in there presenting evidence. But the grand jury is independent, and they get to ask whatever questions they want. And if the prosecutor doesn't want to answer it, he should be making responses and explanations to the grand jury so they can be independent and decide if they want to ask follow-up questions or not. Where a prosecutor hijacks that independent function, if that can be shown, by either not answering questions, choosing not to answer, by not providing complete answers, the example given in the motion was, or by providing or allowing false testimony. So the example given in the motion was in another case, a detective said that a man used an aluminum bat to hit someone in the head and they got a murder indictment. In fact, he had used a stick. That makes a big difference. And the argument there that prevailed in that case, not this case, was, well, hey, if that grand jury knew that it was just a stick, they wouldn't have indicted for murder. They might have indicted for battery, a lesser charge. So this is void ab initio, and he was prejudiced. And then you see those prejudice arguments. This has been all over the news. The whole country, in this case, the whole county in that case, has been told that he's a murderer. You can't unring that bell. You can't come back and say, we'll fix it by just charging him with battery. He's been too prejudiced to recover and get a fair trial. So that would be the next phase. If a judge says you have omitted information, you have failed to answer questions, or you have not provided complete enough answers to guarantee an independent process. So think about it. If you ask a question and the person who answers it only gives you the part of the answer that he likes, he is then guiding the investigation. You don't have an independent investigation. So if a judge goes past that hurdle, then the defense is going to have to demonstrate how their client was prejudiced. That's a whole different argument, because you can cure a defective indictment, grant the dismissal without prejudice, allow them to re-indict, some other sanction below dismissal with prejudice, and maybe they do come back with a lesser charge.
Okay. I want to circle back and get Mark's take on that. But Elizabeth, what is the? I mean, what is the overall feeling? I'm sorry, you're having connectivity issues, but what's the overall feeling within Letcher County after all these months have passed, and we're kind of getting a little bit clearer picture, but people are still asking themselves, what happened here? What's going on?
Do you have to unmute me?
Yeah, I got you. Go,
There
you're
you
good.
go. Okay, thanks. So, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I missed you last one.
Pleasure.
But the overall feeling is really the corruption. The longer this case has gone, the more corruption that has, kind of been revealed, not in the way of any kind of investigation. Um, I wanted to kind of touch on what y'all were talking about with this grand jury. What has been cited by Mickey's attorney is that in that grand jury meeting, the grand jurors asked the prosecutor specific questions about the civil case and how that was connected. And the way that I perceived what else was written in there was that they were redirected. He didn't answer the question from the grand juror. He just kind of redirected them, so they didn't get the information that they were requesting. And so that's kind of a big deal. And one thing that I kind of took from that too was, I wondered, was it through the discovery? Because it seemed like the Bartley team was digging through that discovery. And the only way that they found this, was the way that took it, was that they had read in there, one of the grand jurors referenced that meeting. So that's the only way that they even found out that that meeting took place.
And Elizabeth, do we know anything more about this meeting?
No, not really. The prosecutor, Jackie Steele, has said that it really wasn't a meeting where they were trying to get information. It was more of a meeting where they were signing and creating subpoenas for the case. So I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm kind of interested how your other hosts or guests are going to talk about that.
Yeah, well, let's ask the general here. General, and by the way, we reached out to Mr. Bartley, who is Mickey Stein's attorney, and yet to hear back. I'm going to keep Elizabeth and John muted, and I'll hopefully remember to unmute them just because there's a little weird interference tonight. But Mark, to you, there's a comment up here from someone named Git, if I'm pronouncing it right. If Mickey knew a lot, they don't want him to talk, meaning the government, I think. How do you solve that? Good deal or what? I mean, so this is a guy's interesting question in a way, because you're the government, Mark, and obviously you're on the up and up. I have no doubt about that. But you go to Letcher County, and maybe not all these people are playing kosher baseball here by the rules. And obviously the judge is questionable. You've got Sabrina Atkins saying that she saw him having sex with a quote unquote girl. I think he meant, of age, but in his own chamber. The government potentially has a lot to lose here. Are they in a pickle of sorts?
Kentucky, no. Now, Letcher County itself may have its own issues with regard to potential liability questions with their officials. Of course, a judge would be a state official, so that if there was some wrongdoing there that might subject the state to some potential liability. I don't know. I think the people that brought the original lawsuit, I think one of them's deceased, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
about
one
that.
of them is deceased. Yes.
But it's, focusing on the prosecution of the case, the Commonwealth's job here, the state's job, is simply to prove to the jury that the sheriff murdered the judge and did it intentionally and knowingly. And so all this deposition talk and all the backstory about maybe why the sheriff did it, frankly, that's really not a consideration for the grand jury normally. In Kentucky, their burden of proof under Rule 5.10 is that they just have to have sufficient evidence to believe that the murder happened and that the sheriff committed it. So that's a really low standard. Here in Tennessee, it's probable cause more likely than not. I'm going to guess that sufficient evidence is right about the same place, probably. But that's not a really high bar. This is not a jury trial at this stage of the proceeding. I would be really surprised to see any kind of dismissal of an indictment with prejudice based on this motion. And a grand jury can want all sorts. I mean, they can ask all sorts of questions about the backstory of a case. We see that occasionally. Grand jurors may ask questions about what about the history between the defendant who's accused of domestic assault against the victim. Did he do it before? Mm-hmm. Well, the only question that's really relevant is, did he do it this time? I mean, that's a good question, and people want to know that answer, but it's not necessarily relevant. So I don't know that the Commonwealth is obligated to provide an answer to every question, as John kind of indicated, maybe they should.
Yeah. And John, to you, as I unmute you, we just heard Elizabeth talking, who's the host of Hillbilly Crime, which you should subscribe to, especially for this story. But John, to you, we just heard her talking about a meeting, a quote unquote secret meeting. The only story other than this one that I've covered on this channel with the secret meeting has tons of corruption in it. And that is Ellen Greenberg, young woman stabbed 20 times, 10 to the front, 10 to the back. And her, what most people think is a murder, was ruled a suicide. And the uncle of the fiance was a judge and had a lot of power in the city of Philadelphia. But they had a closed door meeting. And after that closed door meeting, they switched the manner of death from a self-unaliving into a manner that was undetermined before they made it. I'm sorry, they went from homicide to undetermined before they made it a self-unaliving. So that was a moment filled with corruption, a meeting that sounded nefarious. What are you doing as an attorney here for your client to try to find out what this meeting was about?
Well, you're filing the motions that you're seeing filed, and let me clarify something, because it's important to understand grand jury proceedings, unlike petit juries and trials and motions to suppress and other hearings, grand jury proceedings are secret. And you're hearing a little bit of the difference. Indiana's rules on grand juries are a little different than Kentucky's, and Kentucky's are a little different than the feds, but they're all the same key concepts. So to get to your question, saying it's a secret meeting, it's supposed to, the contents of what's going on, and that's really to help people who are being accused in front of the grand jury, because you don't want people who don't end up getting indicted to be branded with having been investigated by the grand jury. So the secrecy behind a grand jury proceeding is to protect people who might not be indicted and witnesses who testify and might be in danger because they testified. Not just physical danger of retribution by a suspect, but danger because they might get fired from a job, something as innocent as that. So saying it's a secret meeting in the context of a grand jury is not surprising. Saying that they didn't record the meeting, okay? Every grand jury jurisdiction has its own rules. That's true. However, they all do require the functions of the grand jury to be recorded. So as the defense attorney, you're saying, I have a need to see that. I need to know what was said to the grand jury. And, again, maybe a little difference between Indiana and other states. We heard maybe it's not relevant. In Indiana, relevance is not the standard in a grand jury proceeding. If the grand jury asks a question, that question has to be addressed. You cannot just leave them out. If they have a question that's relevant to their investigation, if you want to start talking in terms of relevance, again, this is Indiana, and it varies from state to state. But any grand juror question needs to be addressed. if it's not by statute that it needs to be addressed, it sure would be best practices to say, well, yeah, they asked about that. I gave them this information. I explained to them why that's not part of the consideration. And then they moved on. You don't want this big question about whether they had enough information to make an informed decision when they indicted to be hanging and not to be able to answer those questions. So best to answer them, or at least address them and explain why you're not going to answer them. That should be recorded. Once you get those recordings, and that's really the question here, in this case we're talking about, there apparently was a meeting, secret, whatever you want, the contents of which are supposed to be secret. A secret meeting would be one that nobody knew about. Clearly people knew about this meeting. And none of it was recorded, so nobody knows what was said. Although later it was apparently important enough that when the grand jury reconvened, they asked follow-up questions about it. This gets back to best practices. Why are they asking follow-up questions on what they were presented in the meeting where there was no transcript? Well, if you can't tell, then you get to, was it prejudicial? And you get to what the question was. And now you might, and this is a huge might, you might get the opportunity to have the judge who ran that grand jury pull the grand juror in who asked the question and find out what they have to say about what they were following up on and how important it was in their consideration of the final charge.
I mean, Elizabeth, do you know anything more about the meeting that you're able to share? Like, do we even know what date it occurred on? Well, hang on. Let me unmute you here. Go ahead.
I'm not sure what date it was on. I've got all the documents that were released on it, but I'm not sure about a date. One of the other things that Bartley mentioned in there for his request for the dismissal was that Detective Clayton Bailey, the lead detective from the Kentucky State Police, he was the one who testified in the arraignment where they played the video for the first time. He said that the way that he testified in the grand jury was very prejudicial to his client. So I'm not sure what that means either. I guess we'll have to wait and see what the judge says.
Yeah, John, hop in there because I was going to ask you, what does that mean?
Well, in the filing, I got a chance to read the filing. Apparently, the detective was allowed to say to the grand jury under oath that the sheriff was of sound mind when he did this. That's a really dangerous thing to let him say without qualifying it to the grand jury. Maybe asking the sheriff a follow-up question. Are you an expert on that? And that could be very prejudicial, especially in a case like this, where, as I said, maybe mental disease or defect could be at issue, and maybe there were lesser charges that they would have considered. But they have a person who I'm willing to bet is not an expert testifying to sanity. That's reserved for doctors, and he shouldn't be allowed to say that. It may have been a slip of the tongue. He may have been able to give his impression, but just saying outright as a conclusion from a figure of authority like that to a grand jury who might take it as fact just because he said it is very problematic and could raise some real concerns.
Yeah, and Mark, to you, I mean, you're the top boss in those 5 counties in Tennessee, and obviously you'd be staying on top of the case as high profile as this. And if you found out that one of the government employees, aka the police officer, made these statements that he's of sound mind when he's a police officer and not a psychologist, not a professional expert, do you need to step in any way?
Again, this is not a jury trial. I agree with John that could have been a slip of the tongue. I don't know exactly how the question was asked and answered, and whether or not the question was asked. Did he appear to know what he was doing when he shot the sheriff? And I mean, when you watch the video, which we did at the preliminary hearing, the answer to that question is yes. So I don't know exactly how it was asked and answered, but the Rule 5.10 in Kentucky on sufficiency of the evidence for the grand jury does not allow for a dismissal based on the sufficiency of the evidence. Yeah. So you really, as far as I can tell by reading the rule, and John might disagree, but I don't see how you go behind the sufficiency decision by the grand jury when the rule says you can't dismiss an indictment by a challenge to the sufficiency of the evidence.
Kelly, thank you for this. I love you back. I appreciate it. Elizabeth, to you. So you're in the community. Any more information people wanted to know? Kevin Mullins' reputation prior to this? Did Mickey Stines' family, did the daughter ever speak out? Did the wife ever speak out? Have we heard anything from any of these people?
Well, now the judge's family has been pretty outspoken on avenues like Facebook. When our local newspaper will post a story about it, people will comment, and his wife and her sister, I know, at which her sister is the ex-wife of our new prosecutor who took
Hold on.
over.
Say that one more time.
So the judge,
Yeah.
Kevin Mullins,
Uh-huh.
his wife
Uh-huh.
has a sister.
Uh-huh.
Her sister was married to another defense attorney locally who was just appointed by our governor as the new Commonwealth prosecutor. So he's not involved in this case. Our attorney general, the state attorney general, has taken over this case. So even though it's still in Letcher County, it's being prosecuted by the attorney general's office, not anybody locally.
Yeah,
But
go ahead.
one of the interesting things that just happened regarding the civil lawsuit, which I'd never heard of it before, but once I got in and started looking at it and reading the statute and stuff, it seems like it's a very common practice. But the sheriff was included and named in that civil suit in his official capacity, saying that he failed to train and supervise Ben Fields. Well, recently they petitioned the court to have Mickey Stines removed from that civil lawsuit and replace him with the new sheriff. So the new sheriff has now been placed in that civil lawsuit in Mickey's place, and Mickey has been removed from it, which is very interesting and kind of curious to me because they were claiming that Mickey failed to train and supervise him. So now, and that's what Ned Pillersdorf is requesting, is a new deposition. He's requesting the discovery be reopened so they can redepose Mickey because they don't think that he told the truth the first time. Remember, he had that defense attorney who was not representing him in that civil lawsuit accompany him to that deposition and kind of acted in the way that I took it, acted as a babysitter to make sure he didn't say too much.
Yeah, was he even a defense attorney? I thought I remember him not practicing as a defense attorney, but being some other kind of lawyer.
No, Daniel Dotson is a defense attorney, which another interesting development regarding him was just like 2 or 3 days ago. Very recently, he tendered his resignation to the courthouse, and so the clerk had to then call all the other attorneys and redo dates and stuff, reset dates with them. So he has resigned.
Do we know why?
No, he also resigned as his commissioner job. So he was appointed as some sort of like a family court commissioner. So he sat over like juvenile cases and stuff, and he resigned that position as well.
I'm sure you're going to dig into that and keep us posted on Double D, Daniel Dotson. Groovy Mama here. Does Kentucky, John, this one's for you. I basically the question is it a legal or medical term when you're talking about an insanity defense? In Texas and some other states, I know that insanity defense isn't defined in medical terms, but in legal terms. Is it typically just a legal term, John?
Yes, every state and the feds have a statute defining what mental disease or defect is. Legal insanity is generally and across the board regarded as such a profound mental health defect that you do not understand the wrongfulness of your act. So delusional, think God's talking to you. You don't understand. We had a gentleman in Indiana who killed his father, and when the police arrived, he didn't hide anything. He didn't conceal anything. He let them in. He explained that his father would be okay. He was just getting some demons out of him. It would take a while, but as soon as he finished that process, his father would be fine. And there were writings around. He had a history of mental illness and delusions. That's the type of profound disconnect with reality and it's really signified by not fleeing, not doing all the things that would indicate knowledge of guilt, not trying to hide things. And so that is what the legal definition of legal insanity is. The medical community often contributes to the assessments, but ultimately a judge and a jury decide if you meet the definition of legal insanity, which is found in a statute. You can be very mentally ill and not legally insane. If you know that it's wrong to do what you're doing, it does not matter how mentally ill you are. It becomes a mitigator, but it's not a defense. When you don't understand that what you're doing is wrong, not just illegal but wrong, then it becomes a defense and not simply a mitigator.
Look at this, John, getting you business. Are you still in practice? I live in Indy and have a family member that was curious.
Yes.
Sam is asking for a friend. There you go. Still in practice. Look up
Yes.
John Tompkins, criminal defense, Indianapolis. You'll find him.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Happy to give you business, John. So general, you don't need the business. It comes to you. That's a good thing about being the general. Elizabeth just talked about the attorney general stepping in and taking over this case. Just explain the dynamics of that. Obviously, they are, I guess, fearful of corruption or small town affairs going awry. So now the actual attorney general for the state of Kentucky has stepped in. How unusual is that?
That's not terribly unusual. That's mainly done in this particular case to prevent any conflict with the local prosecution, the local DA's. Well, I call it the DA's office, but the local Commonwealth attorney. So in Kentucky, apparently the state attorney general can come in to eliminate that conflict. And that conflict is basically going to be because of the relationships with Elizabeth just described, that the deceased judge's sister-in-law is now the wife of the new DA. So I almost had to do a graph on that. But so that's in that case. In Tennessee, we do it a little differently. We would have another district attorney. We call them a pro tem. They would come from another location, typically geographically kind of close, and step into my shoes, for instance, if I had a conflict. We don't really see our state attorney general doing much criminal work, but Kentucky appears to be a little different in that regard. But I don't know that it's really a signal that they believe, the state attorney general in Kentucky believes that the county's corrupt. They just want to make sure there's no conflict with the prosecution.
Well,
go ahead.
It's the prosecutor. The new prosecutor would have been Judge Mullins's brother-in-law. So that's
a conflict.
Right. Right. That's why the attorney general's office has stepped in, because of that conflict. Yeah. But it's not the actual attorney general himself that's doing it. It's his office. So it was one of the prosecutors that was in his office that was doing it. But I also wanted to point out something else. Whenever they asked for a mental health evaluation on Mickey, there were two types. There was one where they were asking, or one where it would have decided whether he was insane, like competent to stand trial. They said that's not what they were asking for the evaluation. They were asking them to evaluate him for extreme emotional disturbance at the time of the crime. So what they were saying was, that something had happened there in that meeting that they were arguing about. Something happened that, caused him to just freak out and do this.
And Elizabeth, people are commenting like this. It seems like everyone in this town is related. Scary. Someone else said it seems like a very small town. I mean, how big is Letcher County?
I think the county has like 22,000 people. I might have that a little bit high.
And Whitesburg, which is where the town where this happened, is what, like 2,000?
Yep. Yeah.
So,
and go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, like, I think I've asked you this before, but when you go to, let's say, the supermarket, I mean, does everyone know everybody? Is it that small?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah, Kevin Mullins and Mickey Stines, they knew everybody because of the positions that they held. Somebody would have had some kind of interaction with them, whether it be him as a father, taking his kids to school or coming into the gas station to buy a cup of coffee even. We saw him a lot in the evening times down at the only gas station we have in Jenkins, getting his daughter's stuff for their lunchbox the next day. So they were very active members of this community. Something else that people are really kind of shocked about is that anytime usually people needed Mickey, we would just message him on Messenger, on Facebook Messenger. Very seldom do people call 911 if it's not an actual emergency,
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, but there's no way they can have this trial in Letcher County. It looks like they're going to probably have to move or change venue here. Elizabeth, before I get back to Mark, and I think John's now having some trouble, so it's one of those technical evenings here. Ben Fields, for those who do not know, is the deputy that was being discussed in this deposition prior to this murder. And he was actually convicted and sent to the county jail, I believe, for having basically what was going on is that they had an ankle monitor system. There's a drug problem in this part of Kentucky, and were allowing, certain women to be either home monitored or have their ankle monitor released in return for sex. And one of the people doing this was Deputy Ben Fields, who worked underneath Sheriff Mickey Stines, and he got sentenced and only served 6 months. Is he still around? What is he doing now?
He is still here, honey. His wife was there the day that Kevin Mullins was shot. She was a supervisor in the jail. Her and Ben both worked in the jail for 10 years, the same 10 years that Mickey worked as Judge Mullins's bailiff downstairs. So all of these people worked together for years and years and years, and they all knew each other very well. Mickey runs for sheriff. Ben gets in trouble doing what he did, and he got to go spend his 6 months in jail with his wife being the supervisor at the jail. They gave him one of the drunk tank cells to be his cell. They made him a trustee as soon as he started serving his time. And he got a big screen TV. He got a big old mattress in his cell. His wife was allowed to go in there and spend as much time with him as she wanted. She could lay down with him. They could do whatever they wanted in there. The day, well, I don't know how soon after his 6 months was served, but right after he served out his 6 months, then she gets a better job upstairs in Judge Mullins's courtroom. So even though he got in trouble for this, the way that it looks to me and to a whole lot of people around here is that all of these legal minds came together when it came to the investigation on Ben Fields. And it was kind of like, you plead guilty, we're going to take you, and we're not going to investigate nothing else. And that's pretty much what happened, even though we know there were more. And Sabrina talks about it in her proffers. I have seen a video myself of one of the higher ups, and you've seen it too, Joel.
Yeah.
So we know that this has been going on more than with just Ben Fields.
This is sort of fascinating. If you're the defense, John Tompkins, we're just talking about this deputy that was convicted of having sex with these women in the judge's chambers, and then only serves a 6-month sentence. It seems like everybody knows everybody, but the question here is, if you're the defense, you point out that Ben Fields could do his time in Letcher County, but Mickey is not there. Is that a double standard? I guess it's his deputy.
Well, it's, I mean, you've got to think about your client. Do you want him in Letcher County? Do you want to even make that an issue? I think the deputy who was shown great favor, it sounds like, in how he executed his sentence. If he was in favor, you just, and got all that special treatment in what sounds like lenient ways, what's going to happen to somebody who's out of favor? And that might be your client. So, sometimes you have to be a little bit careful about what you ask for, and he may be safer and better off in a different county if they're playing favorites in that jail.
Now we talked about grand juries and General Mark. That's one of the things as it pertains to the judicial system that most people don't know much about. I saw a couple comments. I've never seen a grand jury proceeding. Can you explain to us, as though we were 5, what a grand jury proceeding is like? Where do they meet? Where do they convene? Is it a room? Is it a courtroom? How does it work?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. We bring in a pool of potential grand jurors. We call it a jury pool. Might be 50 to 100 people. Could be smaller in smaller areas. And they're randomly selected from, the driver's license or voting rolls or whatever the case may be, public database. County residents, and then they're randomly selected to sit on the grand jury. And if you're in a jury pool, grand jury is probably what you want to do because you get to do it for that day or two in the state system, and then you're done with your jury service. You're not sitting through jury trials like all the other jurors are in the pool. And so the 12 people that are selected for the grand jury, they get some instructions from the judge about what the grand jury is, how it operates. This all happens in court, in a courtroom, and the judge tells them what their burden is, sufficient evidence or probable cause, that they can't have any bias or favor, that if they have a conflict, to let the foreman know. So they get basic instructions on how it works, and then they'll spend their day basically listening to the prosecution, bring in witnesses who testify under oath. The foreman or forewoman can swear the officers in under oath. And they tell them the facts of the case, and the grand jurors can ask questions. It's usually pretty quick per case, 5-10 minutes, 15, maybe 30 minutes for a complicated case. Could be hours if it's really complicated. But it goes pretty quick, and it's not a trial. And so we tell grand jurors, you're not convicting anybody today. This is simply a charging decision. And the purpose of the grand jury goes back to England. It's a citizen group that acts as yet another check on the progress of cases that move through the system, and approves of and indicts those cases when they move from typically the smaller general sessions people's court to the higher level district or circuit court, typically felonies, but sometimes misdemeanors as well. So it's kind of a screening process. And the defender may have said in the past that the prosecution could indict a ham sandwich. You hear that joke sometimes. That's not really necessarily true. We do sometimes have the grand jury not agree with cases we present. And then there are times when we, like officer-involved shootings, we may present those to the grand jury to just let them deliberate and consider them and make a decision on was that justified or not. So it's not quite the rubber stamp that people think it is.
Yeah. John, back to you, and then I want to get to Elizabeth on reaction to her in Letcher County. But there's a little clarification. This was the same comment a moment ago about doing time. I was saying Ben could do time in Letcher because he was safer than Mickey. That would mean Mickey might have been in danger, question mark. My thing was, does this support the defense about Mickey being afraid? That's an interesting point. So, Mickey doesn't allege. He says something to the effect of, don't kill me. He was very paranoid the day of the arrest. And you see Robert Glock here. Mickey was afraid of being Epsteined, although the new administration says Epstein did it himself. But that's neither here nor there. So what about this? Does that show that he was in fact afraid?
Well, I would say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let John go, and then we'll come to you, Elizabeth.
Okay.
I would say it's consistent with his statement. I would want to look into that. I would say it's the responsible thing for the sheriff and the judge who's in charge of this case to do to avoid any potential of danger. It may, when you know more, come into facts that can be presented, or it may help you find facts that can be presented to show the validity of the fear he stated he had. But at this stage, moving him there is consistent with what he said about being afraid. Probably better safe than sorry in terms of the administrative choice to move him there. And then the defense has to look into the facts that gave rise to that movement and see if there are actual facts that could be presented at trial consistent with the fear.
Elizabeth, please hop in. I know you had a comment.
Well, I just wanted to say, when Ben served his 6 months in jail, Judge Mullins was alive, and Judge Mullins, he ruled everything. He had the power to make sure that Ben served it right there in Letcher County if he wanted to. And I found it very interesting, this very last video that they put out of Mickey in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
He was surprised that they were moving him, that they were not going to keep him in Letcher County. He even said, why? I want to stay here. He acted like he was going to feel safe in Letcher County jail. He seemed very surprised.
Yeah. Norman Parrish here. I got to agree. Elizabeth, excellent job in describing events succinctly and with interesting details. When you, speaking of the supermarket, go food shopping or run an errand, are people stopping and talking to you? Are they upset with you? Are they happy you're digging?
Oh, no. The only person that's been really upset with me is the new brother-in-law, the new prosecutor, because I don't cut him no slack. I'm pretty critical of, actions that deserve criticism. And I'm not really afraid to give my criticism of it. But everybody else, I'm not the only one that sees this. Most of Letcher County has also been screaming this stuff from the rooftops and hearing all the rumors for as many years as I've heard them. So everybody pretty much knows, but people are afraid. You still don't have people that will come forward, because even if they do come forward, as we see, there's no investigation by anybody. There's no investigation by any agency, none whatsoever. It's like all of this stuff just is ignored until we have a court hearing or something. Nobody in Letcher County, not the first official, came out to even acknowledge the Ben fiasco.
Yeah.
Not one official has addressed any of this.
General, let me ask you. I mean, you run the operations in 5 rural counties in Tennessee when it comes to being the top lawman. What do you do? I mean, do you have to have an independent investigation? I mean, everything else aside, it seems like there is gobs of corruption, but it also seems like there could be blowback to a person like yourself who's running the show if you do investigate. But do you need an independent investigation at this point? Oh, got to unmute you there. I think I got you. All right.
Yeah, with a situation like the allegations in the Ben Fields case, which came to light through a civil lawsuit, um, you would expect, and I would expect that we would do a concurrent as soon as we learn these details. If they didn't reach us previously by these victims complaining to us or to somebody in law enforcement, and they come through a civil lawsuit, we would almost certainly initiate a concurrent criminal investigation about official misconduct by the officer, and we would call in a state agency to review that and investigate that to avoid. You don't want your local sheriff investigating his own people. And you're not going to get the local chief of police with an even smaller department to investigate his sheriff's department. So you're going to have to go up, and that's going to be at the state level, which is, what you've seen here in the prosecution of Mickey Stines is the Kentucky State Police are heading that up, and they would have been the ones probably to look into Ben Fields criminally. That's my guess. Now I know his sentence. That 6-month sentence and what I've heard described as his serving of it seems pretty light.
Yeah, it sure does. Sadly, whistleblowers tend to disappear in some small towns. It's not everywhere. That happens in big towns. I remember one of the stories I did at Fox 5 was about air traffic controllers falling asleep and bringing in video games at Westchester Airport, which is where the then President Obama was flying in and out of. And you've got like 10 or 11 commercial airliners that fly in and out of there. And the person who blew the whistle, instead of being congratulated by the FAA, they went after him. But that brings me to you, John Tompkins. In effect, I guess Mickey Stines is sort of, kind of, maybe some sort of whistleblower. We haven't even really heard his side of the story, but is that something you would use as a potential defense? Hey, no one was doing anything about this. It got completely out of control. The corruption rose to such a level, and this guy just snapped because of it. Oh, now I have to unmute you. I'm sorry. I'm like playing piano here. All right, go ahead.
I think that could be a viable defense. It's got some weaknesses in this particular case. Every state has inspector generals. They've got independent agencies to deal with whistleblowers. There are actually whistleblower statutes on the federal books as well that prescribe how you're supposed to go about that. He would have to show, and this sort of dovetails with the fear. He would have to show why he thought the corruption was so deep that he couldn't go through normal channels. That might very well dovetail into why they had this sort of watchdog defense attorney with him during that deposition. That could go a long way towards explaining why he didn't go through normal channels to try to become a whistleblower, and also contribute to the fear defense and the validity of that defense. It's something that definitely needs to be investigated. And with everything we're hearing about how that county was operated, and at the top of the county, the judge who he went after, I mean, that's, if you're going to go after the king, you've got to kill the king, as they say. And if that's what turns out to be the picture of this judge, that would be a key part of the defense.
You see here again from DC 28, Mickey asked for help and was blown off. So we thought no one was going to stop the corruption. What do we know about that aspect? And then after that, Elizabeth, we'll watch this video and have you do some color commentary for us. But what do we know about Mickey's attempt to get help?
Well, we don't really know a whole lot. We know that Jeremy Bartley, in that first arraignment where they showed that video initially, we know that he asked Detective Clayton Bailey on the stand if he was aware of any kind of complaint that Mickey had tried to put in. And as far as I remember, he said no, he was not aware of anything. So I'd like to know where that question came from. He obviously knows something about that. But, Mickey, I don't know if Mickey was involved with any of this stuff. This corruption goes back a long way. Just to give you a little short example, when this brother-in-law decided to come after me, He is a Commonwealth attorney, the prosecutor, the head prosecutor in our county, and he puts it out on Facebook and he tags every single mutual friend that me and him had, and he puts this big long post up about how I've put his children and his niece and nephew on TV, which anybody that watches my show knows I've never done that. He called everybody out and said that they cannot be his friend if they want to be my friend. And if they're going to be my friend, they cannot be his friend. He then gave them like an hour to either unfriend me or keep me on. And then he went and put up another post and put their names out, like tagged every single person, people that didn't even know me, you know, that we might have just been friends on Facebook. And he called so many people out, like, that's not professional. That's not the kind of, and apparently didn't have a bit of fear in doing any of this stuff. He really shows himself to be unprofessional to the T. And if nobody had anything to say about that, like I lost 100 friends, but I gained like 2,000 followers that same day. And half of those people who did unfriend me reached out to me and said, hey, my brother's on parole and we're terrified that they're going to revoke his parole. Somebody else said, my husband's on probation. My sister's in drug court. You know, half of those people had a reason to fear him. And he's went beyond that. One of the girls who's came out, she had her own TikTok, and she claimed to be a victim of Judge Kevin Mullins. And the next thing you know, she was fired from her job. She had a really good job. She was a manager. She had worked her way up from, you know, drug court and addiction to being in sobriety. The next thing you know, the same job who fired her was accusing her of stealing a whole big bunch of money. And now she's facing 15 years in prison. They've made her delete every video she's ever done. And when they went in to talk to him, all he would talk about is how he had every video she ever did saved, and how her videos had hurt his niece and nephew, and he was going to make sure she served 15 years in prison. So now that's retaliation. Now we're seeing some serious issues with this.
Wow.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you to Angela Jones. Love Elizabeth. Best wishes from, look at it. You got fans in Manchester, England. But John Tompkins, I got to ask you. I mean, she's talking about, I believe this is the new DA in town, right? Who's related to Mickey Stines.
Judge Mullins.
I'm sorry, Judge Mullins. I'm sorry. Judge Mullins. It's his, explain it again. It's
his brother-in-law.
His brother-in-law. Got it. Yeah,
they were married to sisters.
Yeah. So, and now he's out here literally threatening Elizabeth and others. It sounds like in a 5-year-old way, like you can't be friends with her if you're friends with me. But I mean, you're the defender against, you know, authority, John Tompkins. You're the one that's supposed to help people like Elizabeth. What do you make of this? This is the new guy, the new sheriff in town, if you will, the new DA. What can anyone do?
Well, it's, you know, that's so wrong on so many levels. First of all, it's completely unprofessional. I think, well, I know for a fact it would subject that lawyer to discipline under the Indiana rules of professional conduct. Then you look at the practical. Let's say that Elizabeth gets in trouble. Well, she's going to get a special prosecutor. Everybody that he called out is going to request a special prosecutor. He called me out by name and said he didn't like me, or he's going to do this to me if I don't unfriend her. I didn't unfriend her. I deserve a special prosecutor because he has shown a personal bias against me. Not to mention, if he ever tries a jury case in that county, how many prospective jurors are going to walk in and say, that guy's a jerk? I'm going to get on this jury just to show him that he can't do that to people. I mean, it is short-sighted. It hurts the county. It hurts it hurts the reputation of law enforcement. And there could be a political price to pay at the next election when he's running. Not to mention just the like I say, the nightmare of all these people who now have this documented on screenshots and messages to them that prosecutor personally calls them out and is biased against them, if they ever get in trouble, first thing I do, I need a special prosecutor. In a small county like that, that's a huge problem.
Yeah, Elizabeth, remember that. And General, to you, again, what do you do if you find out one of your underlings, one of these assistant DAs, it sounds like this guy is the DA for this county, but what if one of the people who works for you is on Facebook threatening the Elizabeth Joneses of the world, saying that, they can't be friends with her and him? What do you do?
Yeah, I caution people when we interview them that I don't want to be the Facebook police, but I will if I have to, and we will pull that down and we'll stop it because, as John points out, that can create ethical issues. You got to be careful when you're dealing with the media, and this is no insult to Elizabeth or any other member of the media. But things can go badly if you're not cautious and careful when you're in the business that we're in, and you have ethical obligations that limit what you can be saying out there about either cases or people. And so I tell all my folks to be very, very cautious. In my district, they run everything through me. And we try to focus on keeping a tight, focused, ethical message that doesn't cause the kind of problems that John is describing.
I've even had spouses of people who work in his office. He went into his own office, slamming fists on the desk, threatening to fire everybody. Even in his own office, if their third cousin was friends with me on Facebook, they were threatened to be fired, to lose their job. I reckon it got so bad that it almost came to blows between several of them down there.
All right. Well, we are over an hour in, and we've got like a 10-minute video. There's no audio. So COE, can you please play this? We'll have Elizabeth give us some color commentary, and Mark and or John, if you want to jump in, everyone can just hop in. But this is the day of the shooting back in September of 2024. This is literally what happens in the judge's chamber before, when it happens, and there might be some video of him walking out. Let me see if I can play this. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Sorry. All right, so this is early on. I don't think we've seen it quite this early. Now, Elizabeth, we can talk over this. So who are the people in the chairs? That's the pastor walking in with a hat, I believe.
Yeah, this was the point. I've watched this several times. That's the preacher man that just came in with Mickey. They're just now getting back from their food delivery that day. Normally they take like 40 boxes on their deliveries, but this day they only had like 3.
Mm-hmm.
And Mickey's lawyer has said that during that delivery, Mickey felt like they were trying to get him isolated somewhere into isolation to hurt him. You see, he opens that door there looking to see if anybody was standing on the other side of it listening.
Yeah. It's eerie. I mean, these are literally the last minutes of his life. Now in the last video I saw, there was more of kind of do we know what he's doing here?
It looks to me like, see, there's another door there in that corner that goes out into the front of the courthouse, the judge's office. So like if somebody was to go to his office, they would go into that room there.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say in the other video I saw, this is the part that I haven't seen. Do we know what's happening here? He's opening the door wide open.
Well, he sent the preacher and the rest of them out. And I think they sit here. I don't know how long. It looks like it's only about 5 or 7 minutes. And it also looked in there. It might not be this video. It might have been the first one that was released. You could tell where they had shortened the clips. And so I think this is the long version of it. So we get to see all that time here, and they just sit and talk.
Yeah. Now what I was saying is in the previous video that I saw, that the preacher man and the other people were in the room for a much longer period of time before
Mhm.
they were, and by that I mean a few extra minutes. But besides the preacher man, who was in the room that's kind of notable?
Well, the woman that was sitting up there in the windowsill works
Mhm.
in Judge Mullins' courtroom. She's one of his assist secretaries or whatever. And then the man that was sitting in the chair, he's another rehab guy. Um, he would be the equivalent of the preacher man, just for a different rehab facility. And this is one of those connections that I've been bringing up with ARC. ARC is the big rehab that was under
Right.
FBI investigation for Medicaid fraud. You had so much funding. You had hundreds of millions of dollars coming into Eastern Kentucky for substance abuse. The drug court program is actually in the other courtroom, the felony courtroom. The program that Judge Mullins ran in the district courtroom was it was a different program. It was a program where they could actually get into rehab instead of being in jail. But it ended up being, if we really look at the program, it ended up really being a revolving door. So all these people, they're either in jail under Ben's wife's supervision, they're on house arrest under Ben's supervision, or they go to rehab under the preacher's
Mhm.
supervision. So you've got, I mean, these people are every single one of them were in a no win situation.
And where the ARC case, like where does it stand currently?
Not heard a word about it.
Yeah. That's interesting and disturbing. There he is looking at his phone, and this is where he gets up in a minute and shows his holster with his weapon. These are literally the last minute and a half or 2 minutes of this man's life, which is just very bizarre to think of it in those terms, as in he will never smoke another cigarette, have another cup of coffee. It looks like he has cups on his table. This is it. It's about to end for him. I'm hoping that this video cuts off before then. We're getting near that point. But Elizabeth, also with the phone, you can see it's like a FaceTime call that someone pointed out. Do we know exactly who that is?
Yes, we do. That is his aunt. His aunt actually calls him on FaceTime, and he answers it. I've talked to his aunt, so I know that is her. We also
Did she tell you what he said?
the call was so short, I don't think he really talked to her. Because as we see in this video, he had other things on his mind. So that call was so short, she didn't say, but she did tell me that everybody's just so upset about it. Mickey, one of the things that I've found out is that Mickey had not slept, which we all kind of already knew that. He hadn't slept in a week or so, or 3 days or something like that. But I found out later that Mickey had went to a doctor the day before this happened for his sleep, and I
Well-
guess people finally talked him into going to the doctor. And from what I've been told, he was told to take Benadryl.
Sounds like something. I come from a family of doctors. Sounds like something doctors would say. Take a Tylenol. John Tompkins again. If this is your client, he's about to stand up and put 8 rounds into this guy. The video is just so damning. I just don't see, outside of an insanity defense here, how you could get a jury to not give this guy, not to mention this guy is a judge, but not to give him the maximum sentence and convict him. I just don't see how you get it. Here we go. And hopefully this is going to, this is the part, John, that General Mark's going to show over and over and over. What are you going to say?
Well, I think it's remarkable that there's so much calm and
Yeah.
there doesn't appear to be. And of course, you have to remember the defense has access to the defendant, and we know what was being exchanged there. And so we have the ability to investigate that conversation and develop that into a potential defense. But the reason that's so important, there's all this calm, there's no fighting, they're not visibly arguing. And then very short order, everything changes, and we see it digitized. Everything changes. That is in keeping with not a justification defense, but a lesser included. So not a murder, but something triggered heat of passion, sudden heat. You're so overwhelmed by emotion or fear. That is sudden heat. So overwhelmed by emotion or fear that you cannot form the intent to commit murder. That is not legal insanity. That is a mitigation for sudden heat. So when you see all that lead up, significant amount of time where they're calm, they're exchanging, they're having a normal conversation, and then all of a sudden there's this violent outburst. You're looking for ways to show that there was something that was so overwhelming emotionally or so frightening, overwhelmed by fear or emotion, that he just couldn't form intent. He acted out of panic or fear.
And I've never seen this part, Elizabeth, where he walks out and comes back in, and he kind of, this is by far the most animated. He looks like he's amped up all of a sudden. Do we know what was going on there?
Well, he goes out that back door, but I want you to look right here. There ain't none of them checks on the judge. That right there is a court security officer. He just now put his gun in his holster, and there he goes down the hallway. All he did was look at Judge Mullins. For the rest of this video, we see him come back and just stand there and stare at him. There was nobody tried to put pressure on wounds or nothing. And he had an open casket. He did not get shot in the head. All of his wounds were in the body area. And that just blows me away that nobody gave him first aid.
Yeah, General, what about that? I mean, we've never seen this. I don't think you have, General, but look, he's just walking by like it's a Sunday morning stroll. This is supposed to be security. You should be doing, first responder type stuff. No CPR, nothing. What do you make of this?
Nothing.
Yeah, this is the first time I've seen it. I'm not real sure what to make of it. I would also expect an emergency response here, and especially given the fact that they're on scene, right? They're at this criminal justice center. This should be a quick response. So I don't know if they had problems seeing exactly where the judge was, if he's under the desk, if it's apparent that he's deceased. I just don't know what to make of this, but I'm curious, like Elizabeth is on that question.
It's incompetence.
Yeah, Elizabeth, do we know who that security guard is? Like, do we have a name for this person?
Yeah, I have it. It's in my phone, but I'm not. I don't know it off the top of my head.
And I assume you haven't talked to him.
No. But he has been a court security guard there. But you got to remember, Ben Fields was also a court security. It just blows me away, and that's one of the big things that I'm so critical of in this county is the incompetence. People have jobs just because they're buddies, just because they're cousins. I mean, that's just, to me, that's negligence. I don't know. Yeah. I'm just shocked.
I mean, this is true. It says he looks like he's watching his grandkid play with a toy. If you didn't see the pixelation, well, this is obviously the part of the shooting. But yeah, I mean, if you saw him, you would think, well, guys, he's got no reaction. It's weird. Elizabeth calls it what it is, incompetence. It might be a little bit more than that in terms of corruption, but wow, this is a story that continues to boggle the mind. This is in Letcher County, Whitesburg, Kentucky. Again, apparently this judge that you just saw and others were having sex in this chamber, allegedly, with women, and it was coming down on the sheriff. He was feeling the heat, and apparently that's a big reason that this all transpired. That's the security man. John Tompkins, he is the defender, criminal defense attorney out of Indianapolis. I'm going to leave it wide open, but I guess I'll frame it this way. If Sheriff Mickey Stines is your client, he calls you, what are you doing right now, John? What are you working on first, second, and third? Let me get you unmuted here. Go ahead there, John.
Well, the first thing you look into is the mental health assessment, because again, looking at this video, you see a lengthy period of calm and then a short outburst of violence where he seems very animated at the very end. So on the low end of defenses, you have a defense of a lesser offense than murder. You're doing a full mental health evaluation to see if you have a mental disease or defect offense. As unlikely as that may be, you're investigating to see whether what he's telling you about what he's scared of can be corroborated, you can gain information, you can interview witnesses, you have anything that you can do to get facts that can be introduced into evidence to validate that fear that he expressed at the time of his arrest. And then, of course, you have the whole motions practice, which we're seeing in attacking the indictment. That can sometimes result in a dismissal, but even if it doesn't, it can result in a prosecutor having to tip more of their hand than they want to early in the process. It can be a very good discovery tool, a legitimate discovery tool. And that's the motions practice side of it. The investigation side of it is both into the facts that led to the fear and the mental health aspects.
Striving for Titus. Elizabeth, do we know if this is true? They laughed on the radio when they were told it was Judge Mullins. And then you have this comment. Do you think Stines told that security guard, because you went in there, he had no reaction at all, wasn't surprised? Do we know if any of this happened?
Well, in the one video that was first released, it was one of the very first videos released. It was a dash cam, or maybe it might have even been body cam, but it was footage from inside of one of the state police cruisers, and he was driving to the courthouse, and he was on the phone with one of his superiors or another police officer, and he said there was just somebody just shot Judge Mullins, and that you hear the other guy say, "Not really," or something like that. And he starts laughing and says, "Yeah." I mean, it's just, it's shocking.
General Mark Davidson, a good person and a good DA, 5 rural counties in Tennessee. Mark, your final thoughts, but what happens to this motion filed by the defense to toss out the indictment? That's not going to stick, I assume.
I would be very surprised if that motion succeeds. I would expect the Commonwealth to be able to respond to that and defeat that motion. And you know, as John would know, when you're in a tight spot like this with a defendant, this is not a whodunit. So you're going to litigate this case. You're going to file a lot of motions. You're going to seek out every legal avenue you can to try to derail the prosecution if possible. But I don't like the chances of this motion succeeding.
Thank you to the general. Thank you to John. And of course, huge thanks to Elizabeth Jones, who hosts Hillbilly Crime, the #1 source on this story in Letcher County, Kentucky. Elizabeth, your final thoughts. I mean, I think there's a lot of fixing that needs to be done in Letcher County. I worry about your safety. Do you worry about your safety at all? And your final thoughts?
Well, some I do, but not from anybody in the county. The ones that I worry about are up there in that courthouse, unfortunately.
And I'm not going to dig too deep, but you take any precautions to protect yourself? Can I ask it that way?
Well, I have cameras and I have big dogs, but one of the big things that I think makes all the difference is I don't put myself in risky situations. You know, I don't go to the bars. I don't run around at night unless I'm going to get my young'un from fishing, you know. I stay at home and I work. I work all the time. So I try to stay away from police as much as I possibly can.
And just finally, what are you looking for next in this case? What kind of information are you hoping to get? What are you looking forward to finding out?
Well, I would just like to see an actual investigation done here. There have been more accusations. There was a press release that was put out a few days ago talking about some of the money that's come into this county, more millions and millions of dollars that kind of is unaccounted for. And so I would just like to see some kind of an investigation into this stuff, you know.
Yeah. Well, you're doing great work. Keep digging. And I think you're going to be the reason there's going to be change in this county one day. So kudos to you. And everyone say a little prayer that Elizabeth stays safe, which I'm sure she will. But if you ever need anything, give us a call. You got John, happy to help you. And you got the general, happy to help you as well. Appreciate you guys. We're back tomorrow with a Diddy update. And then Donna Adelson is in court tomorrow. That's our original OG story. And we're going to see if there's a pool camera. I reached out, never heard back. And we're still trying to find that out. But there should be, as far as we know. We'll see you tomorrow. Love you, America. Love you, Indianapolis. Love you, Tennessee. Love you, Letcher County, Kentucky, and all you Kentuckians in my home state of New Jersey. We'll see you guys tomorrow.